It all started in my sophomore year at the University of Michigan, when I met a girl named Alyssa at a mutual friend's party. She was the kind of girl everyone noticed, confident, beautiful, and sharp with her words, the kind of girl who could make you feel like the only person in the room when she smiled at you. I wasn't the popular type. I was quiet, into computer engineering, and spent most nights coding or gaming. So when Alyssa started texting me after that night, I thought maybe I was finally lucky. We started going out, small coffee dates, study sessions, late-night drives, the kind that make you think this is it, this is love. My friends used to joke that she was out of my league, but I didn't care. She made me feel like I mattered. For 6 months, I built my world around her, buying her gifts, driving her to class, helping her with assignments, and even skipping my gaming tournaments just to spend more time with her. But something always felt slightly off. Her friends, especially Brooke and Tiana, gave me these weird looks when we were together, like they knew something I didn't. I brushed it off as insecurity. Then, one Friday night, she told me she couldn't hang out because she was studying with the girls. No big deal, right? But later that night, my roommate Ethan showed me an Instagram story of them all at a club. Alyssa dancing on some guy, clearly drunk, and her friends laughing, recording it. I felt sick, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. The next morning, she texted me like nothing happened. I didn't confront her, I just waited. A few days later, I overheard 2 girls whispering outside the engineering building, talking about how Alyssa won the bet already. My name came up and one said, "Poor guy doesn't even know he was the game." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every date, every compliment, every "I love you," wondering if it was all fake. The next day, I went silent. No texts, no calls, nothing. She noticed, of course. She started acting extra sweet, maybe out of guilt, but I was done guessing. I needed proof. Ethan helped me dig around, and soon enough, one of Alyssa's friends, who wasn't part of the main group, spilled everything. Turns out, Brooke had dared Alyssa to make me fall in love with her within 6 months, and then dump me in the most humiliating way possible. There was even a group chat where they kept score, laughing about how I looked like a lost puppy and how she would crush the nice guy stereotype. That's when something in me broke, but not in the way they expected. I wasn't going to cry or beg. I was going to make sure they all learned what it felt like to be played. Not through anger, through precision. I had a plan forming, one that would take patience, timing, and a little digital help. They thought they were clever, but they had no idea what kind of person they just messed with. Because when a computer engineer gets hurt, he doesn't just move on, he rewrites the entire system. And I was about to rewrite theirs.
I spent the next week pretending to be the same guy they'd groomed me into being, affectionate, clingy, obvious, while I quietly gathered everything I could. It felt weird at first, smiling into my phone while my brain cataloged every suspicious thing, but I learned fast that the best revenge needs receipts, and receipts don't come from feelings, they come from files and timestamps. I started with what I knew best, digital footprints. I asked Ethan to help me set up 2 throwaway email accounts and a burner Instagram to watch the group without being noticed, and while he laughed at my paranoia, he also helped me slide into the periphery of their social circle online. I saved every story where Alyssa tagged the club, every blurred video where she laughed with other guys, and every screenshot her friends accidentally left public because they didn't check privacy settings. More importantly, I dove into the one place these girls felt invincible, their group chat. I couldn't hack anything, I'm not a villain, but human error is the hacker's best friend. Brooke had a habit of leaving her laptop unlocked in the dorm lounge. Tiana synced messages to her tablet and then left it in a coffee shop. And one of the girls, Jess, posted a funny screenshot on her Snapchat story with the caption, "Bet Update." And because she was sloppy, it saved to a cloud backup I could access once she logged into the same email on my old laptop that she used to borrow for printing. Small openings, but they added up. Piece by piece, I built a timeline. The night she said study night when in reality they were clubbing. The texts where they joked about phase 2. The exact message where Brooke wrote, "This is hilarious. He really thinks it's real," with a laughing emoji. I wasn't just collecting proof of cheating, I was collecting proof that the entire relationship had been a dare, a game to boost someone's social status. While I compiled files, I planned how to use them without looking like a bitter ex. Public shaming felt cheap. I wanted accountability, not petty cruelty. So I mapped out a 3-stage plan. First, undeniable exposure to the people who mattered most to them, family, scholarship boards, and the one guy Alyssa supposedly liked for clout. Second, a controlled reveal to the campus admin and the sorority advisor so the girls couldn't hide behind "boys will be boys" excuses. And third, a social pivot that would force them to face consequences where they'd always been judged online. I practiced my delivery in front of my mirror, rehearsing the neutral tone I used during presentations because I knew emotional theatrics would undermine everything I'd worked to prove. I also started documenting my own behavior while they were plotting. Receipts that showed I'd been nothing but genuine. My calendar with dates, photos from the hikes we took together, text threads where I asked if she was okay, voice notes of her saying, "I love you." I had to protect myself from any attempted gaslighting that could flip the narrative back onto me. One night, after dinner, Alyssa came over and curled up on my couch like she always did, and I let her. She asked why it was quieter lately, and I said, "Thinking about midterms." And she laughed and kissed me, and that kiss felt like cockroaches crawling under my skin, knowing what I'd found. But I kept my face blank. Meanwhile, I quietly messaged the small circle of people who would react rationally. My professor, who headed the student conduct committee, a journalist from the college paper who'd covered a cheating scandal last year and knew how to handle sensitive exposes, and an alum who worked in HR at an internship program the girls were vying for. I didn't include anyone vindictive, I included the ones who could verify facts and ensure consequences would be fair. The next step was bait. I needed them to underestimate me again, to make one careless public move that would let me drop the bomb without it looking staged. So I started playing the nice, clueless boyfriend role even harder, publicly liking her photos, leaving long comments about how proud I was of her, and even arranging a surprise dinner that I intentionally posted about, knowing they'd see and mock it. Predictably, the mockery began, and they bragged about how easy it had been to string me along. That arrogance would be the wedge I needed. At 2 a.m., with coffee and late-night focus, I compiled a master folder labeled simply "Truth" and encrypted it, then sent selective, time-stamped previews to my backup contacts, screenshots with dates, a link to a private folder for the student conduct office, and a short, factual note to the campus reporter saying, "If you want to verify anything, I can provide more." I didn't celebrate or gloat. I felt hollow, like someone who'd performed surgery on his own heart, but I also felt ready. What happened next would require patience, and the girls were running out of both.
Once the folder was ready and the right people had a peek, I stopped hiding and started coordinating. I scheduled a meeting with the student conduct office for the following Tuesday at noon and emailed the campus reporter to run a discreet piece that would air the next morning. But the most satisfying part was how perfectly ordinary I kept acting in public so none of them suspected the storm brewing. I showed up to class. I laughed with friends. I posted vague, upbeat captions about new beginnings, all while watching the threads of their lives begin to fray in real time. The reporter called me the night before and asked for an interview. I agreed but kept it clinical, giving only the facts and offering the receipts in a private folder for verification, which made the piece airtight. At 9 a.m., the campus feed lit up with a story headlined "Sorority Bet Sparks Campus Backlash," and it hit at the exact moment Alyssa was walking into her departmental seminar. I watched the little green read dots on my phone spike as people messaged me screenshots of their group chat messages, their own comments, and the video Jess had posted that had finally been downloaded by a student who didn't mute cloud backups. Alyssa texted me, frantic, "What did you do?" And I sent back a single line. I told the truth. She called me, voice shaking, begging me not to involve her family. I cut the call. The immediate fallout was delicious and sharp. Brooke's parents were called by a furious aunt who forwarded the article, and Tiana's internship coordinator messaged her requesting a meeting to discuss professionalism concerns after an anonymous tip forwarded screenshots of her bet update comments. The girls tried to spin it as a stupid college prank, but the screenshots were damning. Precise timestamps, mocking language, and a plan that explicitly said the goal was humiliation. The sorority advisor placed the chapter on temporary probation and demanded a meeting. The student conduct office opened an investigation. On social media, the reaction was brutal and not always merciful. The campus thread filled with people sharing their own stories of being used for clout, and I watched as the girls' follower counts dropped and their DMs filled with rage and disappointment. Alyssa posted a tearful video denying that it was her intent to hurt anyone and begging for privacy, but her voice cracked when an off-campus friend posted a longer clip from a party where she could be heard laughing about how easy he was. That clip alone erased her apology. I didn't release any of the most personal files. I wanted accountability, not revenge porn. But I did provide the conduct office with everything necessary to corroborate the timeline, and I offered the journalist the most incriminating group chat screenshots under the condition they would not publish anything that violated privacy laws. We both wanted the truth to be known without turning into a pile-on. While authorities and admins did their parts, I pivoted to the social angle I'd planned, a controlled reveal to Alyssa's immediate circle and the one guy she'd been spotted with at the club. I sent a carefully worded message to his manager, a slow, calm note that said simply, "Your client has been publicly associated with a campaign that used a man for clout. I can share evidence if you want to hear both sides." The manager responded fast, apologetic, and professional, and within hours the guy's PR team issued a statement distancing him from any intentional involvement and removing the incriminating club footage he'd posted. It was small, but it rattled their confidence. They began to delete posts, to scrub tagged photos, to whisper to each other in the dining hall about damage control. Meanwhile, Alyssa's friends started to fracture under pressure. Jess, who'd been sloppy with cloud backups, tried to say she'd been joking, but the messages betrayed her. Brooke lashed out on a private Instagram story that was screen-recorded and circulated by someone who'd been watching the situation unfold. Her anger only made people angrier. Tiana, who had been the quiet planner, went silent. I later learned she'd been called into a meeting with the internship board and warned that her future placement could be revoked. Watching them panic wasn't something I enjoyed the way someone watches a show. It was more like a slow, hollow confirmation that I'd done the right thing by stopping this behavior before someone got hurt worse than me. Through all of it, the hardest part was seeing the look on Alyssa's face the one time we crossed paths on campus. She avoided my eyes, her friends keeping a protective distance as if I'd suddenly become contagious. People whispered, people pointed, and I felt a strange mix of triumph and emptiness, because exposing the lie didn't fill the hole it left behind. But exposing it did make sure they couldn't pretend it never happened, and in that, there was a kind of brutal justice. The university moved forward with hearings, the sorority faced sanctions, and the girls were forced into conversations they had never expected to have with parents, advisors, and potential employers. The ripple effect began to spread beyond our little circle, and I knew the next phase required me to be careful. Public anger can turn on anyone, and I didn't want to be the villain in someone else's story. So I prepared for what came next. Legal statements, more documentation, and a way to reclaim my own narrative before the online mobs decided they knew the whole truth.
After the initial chaos calmed into orderly investigations, I shifted into cleanup and narrative control mode because I'd learned the hard way that truth left unattended can twist into rumor. I scheduled a sit-down with the student conduct investigator and the sorority advisor and walked in with a printed binder, neat tabs, timestamps, labeled screenshots, voice memo transcriptions, party video frames with time codes, everything laid out like evidence in a courtroom because I refused to let sloppy gossip decide the outcome. I explained how the group had systematically planned the bet, how their public posts and cloud backups corroborated the timeline, and how my own behavior had been consistent and sincere. I stayed calm, precise, and painfully factual, the kind of live reloaded composure you only get when you've rehearsed 1,000 times in your head. The investigator asked difficult questions, and I answered without venom. I wanted my words to carry weight, not performative anger. Meanwhile, Alyssa's attempts to rewrite history kept surfacing. A brief interview where she blamed pure pressure, and another where she cried and tried to apologize without admitting the bet. But those didn't hold up against the receipts. Her apology videos felt rehearsed and hollow. People had heard the same laughter in the leaked party clip and could hear the difference between guilt and a performance. Her parents called me once, in shock and embarrassment, and I spoke to them honestly, not to gloat, but because they deserved to hear the truth from someone who had been honest with their daughter. Broader consequences followed. The sorority faced sanctions for conduct unbecoming its reputation. The national chapter required mandatory workshops on consent and respect and placed several members on probation, limiting their campus privileges and leadership opportunities. Tiana's internship offer was rescinded pending review. Jess was fined by the Student Activities Board for violating digital privacy policies when she publicly shared screenshots without consent. None of this happened because I wanted punishment. Okay, maybe a little of that satisfaction existed, but because a system finally recognized behavior that preyed on someone's emotions as more than a college prank. As the official outcomes landed, some people tried to call me selfish or say I had ruined young lives. That stung, because my goal was accountability, not ruin. But I'd also learned the bitter lesson that when you pull back the curtain, some will resent the person who exposed the show. To protect myself from false narratives, I launched my own short-form narrative, not a smear campaign, but a podcast episode outlining the timeline, the emotional fatigue, and the steps I took to protect future students from the same abuse. I recruited the campus reporter to help keep it balanced. She interviewed me, asked tough questions, and then aired a piece that focused on patterns rather than personalities, interviewing others who had been used for likes and followers. The piece didn't vilify them. It contextualized the culture that made a bet like that feel acceptable to begin with. The reaction was complicated. Some listeners praised me for courage, others accused me of seeking attention. But importantly, the conversation moved from gossip to policy. The university announced plans for a mandatory consent module for incoming students and clearer rules about digital privacy and public shaming. That felt like a small victory that mattered more than revenge. In private, Alyssa spiraled, not melodramatically, but quietly. She dropped out of a leadership bid she'd been eyeing, struggled in classes where gossip made group projects awkward, and her closest friends distanced themselves as the sorority's hierarchy changed. A few months later, she reached out asking to meet. I agreed, partly because I wanted closure, and partly because I knew the human part of this story deserved a human ending. We met at a neutral cafe. She apologized again, this time without theatrics, voice low and raw, admitting she had been stupid, cruel, and selfish, and that the popularity she chased had felt like oxygen at the time. I listened. I told her truthfully how the betrayal wrecked me, the sleepless nights, the moments I questioned my worth, the humiliation. But I also said I didn't want revenge to be my identity. I wanted to move forward. She cried, I didn't. Forgiveness wasn't immediate, and I made it clear that accountability wouldn't be erased by words. As for Brooke and the others, consequences lingered in subtle ways: lost leadership, wary peers, and an internship landscape that now required more than charm. In the end, the part of me that had planned the exposure felt strangely empty when the dust settled, because revenge isn't the same as healing. What mattered most was that the culture that allowed such bets to happen was forced to change, and that future victims might find fewer people willing to laugh at their pain. I left the campus that semester with a clearer head and an internship lined up because no one wanted to hire a liability. I kept my dignity by refusing to become a monster, and by using evidence and process rather than spectacle to make my point. Revenge had been a tool, ugly and efficient, but the real victory was turning pain into policy and making sure that the next person wouldn't have to build the same binder of receipts to be believed.
For a while, I thought that would be the end. The investigation done, the apologies made, and the lessons supposedly learned. But closure doesn't arrive like a letter in the mail. It's something you have to build yourself. A few weeks after our cafe meeting, campus life started to return to its rhythm, though people still whispered when I passed by. The whispers didn't sting anymore. They just reminded me how fragile reputation could be.
and how easily people choose sides without context. Alyssa kept her distance, but occasionally I'd get messages from her old circle, some angry, some weirdly apologetic. Brooke sent a 3-line message, "You won. Happy now?" I didn't reply because it wasn't about winning. It was about not letting them rewrite my story into a joke. But the truth is, I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd sacrificed while plotting their downfall. Sleepless nights, distrust toward anyone who showed kindness, the paranoia of expecting betrayal in every smile. So I did something unexpected. I turned the experience into my senior project proposal, a behavioral case study titled Digital Deceit and Emotional Exploitation in Social Contexts. It wasn't about them directly, but it examined how online validation, groupthink, and ego feed into cruelty disguised as entertainment. My professor loved it and encouraged me to expand it into a research paper. For the first time, my pain had purpose beyond revenge. It became knowledge. Meanwhile, the consequences of their actions didn't fade easily. Alyssa's video apology haunted search results under her name. Brooke lost her ambassador role for a fashion brand after screenshots resurfaced on Reddit, and Tiana's revoked internship became a cautionary tale among sorority recruits. I didn't gloat, but part of me felt a grim satisfaction that truth had a longer memory than people assumed. Around that time, the campus news team approached me again. They wanted to film a short documentary about digital ethics and consent, with my story as an anonymous case study. I agreed under one condition: no names, no faces, just facts. The film premiered during Student Awareness Week, and the reaction was electric. For days, students discussed respect, manipulation, and the line between social games and psychological harm. Professors quoted it in lectures. Even the administration quietly reached out, asking if I'd consult on a digital accountability guideline for student clubs. The irony was sharp. I had started as someone being played for amusement and ended up helping rewrite the very rules that allowed such behavior to thrive. One night, as I walked past the quad, I saw Alyssa sitting alone on a bench, scrolling through her phone. I didn't stop, but she looked up and our eyes met. No hatred, no tears, just recognition that we'd both burned something we couldn't rebuild. I nodded slightly. She nodded back. That tiny gesture felt like the quietest ending possible to the loudest chapter of my life. After that, I stopped checking their social media. I stopped tracking the ripple effects. I focused on my own world again, coding, building, creating, and eventually landed a summer internship at a cybersecurity firm that valued my methodical thinking. It felt poetic, almost karmic, that my ability to track deception turned into a career skill. When graduation came, I walked across the stage calm, confident, no longer the naive guy who believed every "I love you," but not yet cynical enough to stop believing in people. Revenge hadn't healed me, but it had cleared the rot so I could start healing properly. As I packed my dorm, I found the old encrypted folder labeled Truth. For a second, I hovered over the delete key. Then I did it, erased everything, not to forget, but to release. Because at some point, holding on to revenge becomes its own kind of prison. I left campus that day lighter, not proud of what I'd done, but certain I'd done what needed to be done. Somewhere between heartbreak and justice, I found self-respect. And that, I realized, was the real revenge, living free while they still carried the weight of their choices.
Graduation came and went like a quiet sunrise, not a cinematic ending, just a slow exhale of everything I had carried. By then, my story had already traveled beyond campus. Some people knew the details, others just knew fragments. That guy whose girlfriend made a bet. It became an urban legend whispered to incoming freshmen, the kind of cautionary tale that grows softer over time. I didn't mind. Let it fade into a story if it meant no one else had to live it. After college, I moved to Austin to start my new job in cybersecurity, a fitting twist for someone whose life unraveled because of digital carelessness. The first few months were strange. I'd walk into a coffee shop and instinctively scan faces, half expecting to see someone filming me, laughing, mocking. Trauma rewires you like that. But slowly, normal returned. I made new friends who didn't know or care about what happened, and for the first time in years, conversations weren't heavy. I laughed without wondering if someone was laughing at me. Still, one night, curiosity got the better of me, and I searched Alyssa's name. Her profiles were private now. She'd stopped posting months earlier. A mutual friend's tagged photo showed her with shorter hair, less makeup, sitting quietly at a park. She looked older, not physically, but in the eyes, the same way I felt. I realized revenge hadn't destroyed her. Life had done what it always does, handed her time and silence to think. That was enough. Brooke had transferred to another university after the sorority fallout, and Tiana apparently took a gap year. The universe had scattered us, and I didn't need to keep track anymore. The real closure came unexpectedly when I got invited back to campus for an alumni panel. After the talk, a student approached me, nervous and shy, saying she'd seen the documentary I helped with. She told me her roommate had been manipulated in a similar way, but found courage to speak up because of that story. I didn't know what to say. That one moment, that quiet thank you, felt more powerful than all the screenshots and exposure ever could. For the first time, the story wasn't about pain, it was about prevention. Later that night, sitting in my apartment, I thought back to that first night at the party when Alyssa smiled at me like I was the only person in the room. The memory didn't sting anymore. It just felt like a scene from someone else's life, like watching a movie I'd outgrown. I smiled, turned off my laptop, and finally felt peace in the silence. Life has a cruel way of teaching lessons, but if you listen closely, it gives you meaning too. Alyssa taught me never to build my worth on someone else's approval. Brooke and Tiana taught me that cruelty thrives in crowds but crumbles in truth. And revenge, the word that had driven me for months, taught me that real justice doesn't come from watching others suffer. It comes from rebuilding yourself so completely that no one's betrayal can shake you again. Years later, when I tell my story on podcasts or panels, I don't call it revenge anymore. I call it recovery. A long, painful, but necessary evolution. Because when someone turns your heart into a bet, the best payback isn't making them lose. It's proving that you were never a prize to begin with. And as I look around my quiet workspace, surrounded by the hum of servers and the steady rhythm of my own breathing, I realize something simple but true. The bet they made to break my heart became the reason I learned how to protect it. That's not just revenge, that's victory.